Hey there, y'all, and welcome to the kitchen. This week's shortcut supper is a fall classic with a little bit of a twist that you're going to want to make almost every week. I'm going to do a really easy Tex-Mex pot pie that's going to start with a yummy thick chili base, and we're going to build the crust out of green chili cornbread mix. Listen, this cornbread is something that you could use by itself all the time, but I'm going to teach you how to make this little twist on a regular cornbread that you are going to absolutely want to eat just the crust and leave everything else behind. But this chili just is so super rich and thick. This is a hearty meal. You're going to want to make a lot. So we're going to start by making a, like I said, thick chili base. And we don't need a ton here of liquid and stuff because the goal is something like a stew instead of a soupy situation. So first things first, I'm going to get my beef in my pan. I've got 2 pounds of meat here. I'm going to use only a pound of this, but I always like to buy it in bulk, especially if we have a good sale, and just use what I need and keep the rest on hand for another meal. So I'm going to take my pan, put it on about medium-high heat, get a tiny bit of oil in my pan because it's not a non-stick skillet, which I already did. That's a couple of tablespoons of avocado oil. You can use whichever oil you like. And then I've also got myself, oh, here it is, already out. I've got myself a little meat masher. I've loved having this. I'm not normally a tool girl per se, but my husband got me that a few months back, and I'm like, I'll try it. And it does make a difference. I've always been like I'm just going to use my wooden spoon kind of chick. Well, that one's changed my mind. I'll link it below if you would like to get yourself one. They're super inexpensive. So I'm going to use about a pound of this meat, and we're going to start this in my pan, and then I'm going to start chopping and addressing the rest of my vegetables and my components for my chili. I'm going to rinse my fingers really quick. Now, anytime that you are building any sort of chili or sauce that's going to actually get liquid and other things added to it, an important thing to remember is spices need to go in fairly close to the beginning of the process. So I've got my meat on medium-high heat. It's starting to come up to temperature and sizzle and brown. And once I really hear it starting to do stuff, I'm going to mix it around a little bit. Then I'm going to put just my onions and garlic in, and that's when my spices are going to make their appearance. I normally teach you how to use a taco seasoning blend that I make, and I'm going to put that in the comments. But here, we're just going to really do this the shortcut way because I'm doing a couple things that aren't as other shortcut. Like, for instance, I'm going to chop this onion and show you how to do that chopping method where you could absolutely use the frozen onions that we talk about all the time. So I'm going to chop half this onion because we only need about a cup of an onion. It's a pretty large size. But if you're using a frozen bag of onions, just use a cup out of that bag and use the rest later. So, and after my onions go in, that's when my seasonings are going to go. If you've made the homemade blend that I shared before, you're just going to need a couple of tablespoons of that in this mix. And then when you get them into the process, makes a big difference. See, if you put it in once you've got all the liquid and all that kind of stuff in there, it's going to take a lot more seasonings to actually pack the punch that you're looking for. Whereas if you put them in at the beginning where the heat can really wake them up, they're going to be so much more powerful. That's just a little bit of a principle of cooking that most people don't know. I've seen people do recipes, even people sharing recipes online before. And they're like adding all this stuff in, water, liquid, broth, whatever. And then at the end, they're sprinkling in seasonings. And I'm like, wake them up and you don't have to use as much. So anyway, let's start with our onion chopping skills, and then I'm going to mix this around. It's going to do its thing for a minute because I can hear it sizzling. You want it to brown. You want it to get some good color on there. So first thing, I'm going to make an arch with my finger, and I'm going to pass through one way. You'll soon see how easy it can be if you know the method. And then the other way, with my fingers curled under, I'm just going to come back through, and I'm always going to use this until it's totally stable. And then when it feels a little wobbly, I can rock it forward and then replace my fingers and go through again. And that's just going to add another label of stability to your last few slices. All right, I hear good things back here, so let's get this mixed around. I'm going to come over here so I can grab the handle. Like I said, this is going to be very thick, more like a stew, not a ton of liquid. You want this to really hold up to the cornbread on top to be more like a pot pie than a soup with a dipper on it. We're going to bake this in the oven at the end to get the cornbread nice and cooked. So this part of the chili is going to go super fast once our meat's brown. Okay, we're going to get our onion in and our spices in. And you've heard me say before, if this is not your first episode, brown food tastes good, and that is what we're going for here. This is where the time actually counts the most. Getting these things in the right order to do their thing on the highest heat before you add in a lot of liquid to bring down the temperature, that's very important. So we're going to go in with, again, this is 1 pound of meat, 1 cup of onions, and then I'm going to use 1 pack of seasoning mix. If you're using the homemade kind that I'm going to share below, 2 to 3 tablespoons is going to be how much I would recommend. But this is what I always say. Use your taster. Don't just do what the recipe says. The most important tool you have in the kitchen are 2 things God gave you. Your taster and your hands, okay? Third, I would say, is your nose. And maybe they could be in a different order, but they're very important tools, and you already have them without going out to the store and buying them. So I'm going to get that mixed around, get our onions on our heat. Our spices are already smelling super powerful, so that's always a good sign. You want them to smell like something. You don't want to put them in the pan and be like, did I even put anything in there? Then I'm going to put in a tablespoon of garlic here. And again, this is a spoonful that I'm just going to do heaping, so that may have been a little more than a tablespoon. It is what it is. More seasoning won't hurt anybody. And because we are going to build more flavors in here, I do want to navigate my salt myself a little bit, so I am going to add about a teaspoon of salt at this point. And then we will build that as we go. A little crack of pepper, and we're going to start getting our canned ingredients in here. The next most important one to get in is our tomatoes, because our tomatoes are going to need to do a little bit of breaking down in this process, but I do want to mix in my garlic. Here we go. It is already smelling like a yummy fall day in here. I always wait for these seasons to come around that are new, like whatever the next season is. I'm super excited by the end of the old to get into the new, because I'm ready to cook some new seasonal things that I haven't done in a while. Because my husband and my boys typically work outside a lot, we don't want to make chili in the middle of the summer for some reason. So by the time October comes around, I'm like, yes, it's chili season again. And all kinds of other things. Yes, it's beef stew and salmon stew and chicken and dumplings, and those just things that are good, hearty, comforting things that we kind of take a little bit of a break from in the big hot summer months, especially down here in the deep south. Okay, so I'm getting my tomatoes in. There was already a good softening starting on my onions. We really got the flavors awake in my spices. So my chili is getting a little bit of soupy action now. I'm going to turn my heat down just a little bit. We're going to go to medium at this point. And then I'm going to get a few other things in this pan. Now, we are not going to put a whole can of corn in here, but our corn is going to serve 2 purposes. We are going to use half of the can of corn in our cornbread and half of the can in the pot pie chili base. And I just kind of love that because it's a little bit more of an ode to a traditional pot pie to have that extra vegetable in there. So I'm going to drain my corn, and I'm going to put half in now, and then I'm going to put half into my cornbread mix later. Now, you don't have to have exactly half, but you just eyeball it. And that looks good to me. And then in my pan, I'm also going to put some beans. I've got black beans here. You can use kidney beans, chili beans. And chili beans actually have chili seasoning in them, so they actually do pack a punch if you want to keep the liquid on those. I'm not going to totally drain and rinse these, but I am going to get rid of a little bit of the liquid. The reason I'm keeping some of the liquid is it does have some salinity to it, but it also helps with the thickness of our chili right here. All right, so The bean liquid is very starchy, so it helps with the whole stew-like consistency here. Okay, now I am going to need a tiny bit of water, so I've got my jar of water here, always on hand. So I'm going to fill this up about halfway, just to get any extra beans out of the bottom. And then we're going to also add in some vegetable base. You could also use beef base here if you wanted to, but that's just going to give us a depth of flavor like this has been cooking for longer than it has. So I'm going to do a tablespoon of vegetable base or beef base here, either one. And then I'm going to put in a little bit of water. I love having these bouillon and beef base on hand, because even if you don't have stock, even if you don't have a slow cooking time, they add that flavor like you've been here all day, and it's just such an easy thing to have on hand. So we're going to get everything stirred in. Now, what I want to do at this point is make sure my bottom of my pan has got all the bits scraped off of it. That's the point of this liquid at this point. Yes, it's giving everybody room to groove, but you don't want to leave any brown bits on the bottom of our pan, because those are all flavor. Really, at this point, while it's coming up with a simmer, I'm going to trade for a wooden spoon and start to scrape the bottom of my pan, because that's the very best way to actually be able to feel and get all those bits off the bottom. So we're going to get everything nice and incorporated here, all the brown bits up. I've still got about a medium to medium low heat. Mine goes from 8 to high, and then my low is like 2 down to low, so it's got even numbers. I've got it between 4 and 6, so exactly on medium. That's a 5. Okay, so now my chili is going to just keep stewing for a minute, reducing just a little bit, letting those flavors get married in there and cook down. So while that happens, we are going to make a little bit of cornbread. Now, anytime you want to shortcut something, cornbread mixes are awesome to have on hand. They are a super quick way to have everything portioned out. You're not even having to get out many measuring cups, especially for your dry ingredients. And often they have a little bit of more flavor, depending on which one you get, specific to what you like. So if you want to do a shortcut, know the brands that you like. There are ones that even have a Tex-Mex spin on them already. Just get what you like. If some of them are sweeter, some of them are less sweet. Your family likes a little sugar in their cornbread, get the one they like, okay? Anyway, there's my spill on cornbread, because it's one of those to each his own, so I don't want to say too terribly much and step onto anybody's toes. But in my house, they don't love a ton of sweet in their cornbread, I'll say that. So I'm going to start getting my mix in here, and for my cornbread, I'm going to need one of these containers of mix, 1 egg. A little bit ahead of myself, I better crack this egg. And I'm going to use a can of diced green chilies. And this is going to add, obviously, some moisture to my pan, to my cornbread. But it's also going to pack a huge punch of flavor. So we're going to get in 1 can of diced green chilies. And really, you want to follow your recipe as your carton, whatever one you choose, says as far as liquid and eggs go. And then you're adding these few other things to it to just amp it up. So this one calls for 1 egg. And then I'm going to use 1/4 of a cup of oil. I think I got my 1/2 cup measure here. Now, oil in cornbread is very important. It's either going to call for oil, melted Crisco, melted butter. Your fat is very important, because that's what's going to give you your crispier edges. Now, this is a 1/2 cup, and it's going to call for 1/4, so I'm only going to use 1/4. And then I'm going to add in just a little bit of milk. I'm going to do 1/2 cup of milk. And we always like to use our cornbread as a base for something better than what it was created for. Even if I'm making normal cornbread for us to have like chicken soup one night, I put some cheddar cheese and some garlic powder and some onion powder in it. Easy to get that amped up and better than it came. Okay, that's 1/2 cup of milk. And then I'm gonna add in the rest of my corn. And at this point, if you wanted to use cream corn, for this. I actually have used the cream corn, and it's been something kind of like a corn souffle almost. It's a really awesome option. Even if you're doing it like I do a corn chowder that I've actually taught my students recently, and that cornbread with the cream style corn, super good for the corn chowder. Okay, put all this away, and then I'm going to need to grate some cheese after I get this mixed up a little bit. So I'm just going to whisk this up and grate in about 4 ounces of Colby Jack cheese. This is all about what cheese you like, what cheese you have on hand. No big deal if this is not your cheese of choice. Get what you want to do. Okay, whisk, and we're about to be in business. All right. Now you want to make sure your egg and everything is incorporated evenly. This is gonna be so yummy on top of our chili. All right, now let's get some cheese in there. Now, if you have a regular standard block, 4 ounces is half of that block of cheese. So we're gonna use about 4 ounces here. And what I love to do for this is use almost all of this cheese actually in the cornbread, and then leave a little bit for the very top. That helps a lot in the presentation department. And I did just recently get a new grater. I'm gonna watch my fingers. It is a powerful grater. There's some tools that you actually should take more seriously, and I've learned my grater is one of them, especially when they're brand new. Okay, so we are going to get our cheese in, and now my oven is preheated to 400 degrees. This is getting nice and saucy, and I'm gonna leave about a good handful of my cheese out. Once my cornbread mix is completely done, I'm gonna sit it to the side. And you can, if you wanted to do this in like a cast iron or just a little bit of a smaller dish with higher sides, you could do this in an oven safe casserole, or an oven safe cast iron or a higher sides dish to go straight into the oven. But I wanted you to be able to see everything I'm doing in the pan. So for that, I do want to go ahead and cook this in a casserole dish so the cornbread has room to rise and all of our sauciness will not spill out. So that's one of the things about making it so y'all can see it. I didn't do it in the dish that I normally would do it in, but for the purpose of you seeing what's going on, that's more important today. So we're gonna put this to the side. I'm gonna turn my chili off, let it cool down just a little bit. We're gonna spray our casserole dish. If I get a chance to cool down 2 seconds before I pour it, it might be a more friendly transition. All right, and if you have a bigger casserole dish, it'll just be a little bit thinner in your pan, a little shorter cooking time. If you have one this size, we're gonna go for about 20 minutes and check our cornbread and see where we're at, okay? So, I'm gonna get it in here. Oh, y'all, the smell is amazing. Absolutely amazing. Get my big spoon over here before I make this transition. All right, here we go. I mean, you could gather around that with just some tortilla chips and it'd be a good day. All right. Get everybody in the pool. Don't leave anybody behind. Woo! There we go. All right. There's that. Now for our cornbread topping. I'm going to get this real evenly spread out. And I have to tell you, if you get invited to a football party and you come with this in tow, there's nobody that's going to be mad about that. You'll get invited back again, I promise. Okay, on with our topping. Now, our goal here is just to get it almost as evenly as we possibly can. Take your time dumping it. If you need to go back and fill in some little gaps later with what you have left, we always go back and forth to kind of fill in the places the most evenly we can. If you get ahead of yourself and you just start pouring, you could get a lot in one place and be having to try to chase it down. Been there, done that. Chase it down for the skimpy side. So if you just take your time a little bit more, you won't be doing that as much. All right, and now just as promised, we spread this out a little bit and put some cheese all over the top. Okay, once this goes in the oven, we're at about 20 minutes, like I said, to just make sure that this cornbread is all cooked through. Another good thing that you can do is you can cook this just like this for 20 minutes, and then you can reheat it the night that you want to do it, cover it again for about 20 minutes. It's a really good pre-made one to have on hand. All right, in my 400-degree oven, this is gonna go. Again, I'm gonna check it after 20 minutes and I'll show you what it looks like. I'll be right back. Okay, y'all, it's that time. Drum roll, please. It smells so good in this kitchen. It's been about 22 minutes. My casserole pan is absolutely bubbling to the brim. So you're gonna see why I said to put something higher sides in the game here, because you're gonna need that space. It is a bubbly, beautiful, cheesy, golden brown situation. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have to take a picture of this before I do much damage. We literally have a crust on here that looks like a golden crown on a pot of chili. Yummy, yummy, yummy. So before you spoon into this, always let it rest for a few minutes. Of course, it's gonna be molten hot lava in your mouth right now, but also as it sits, it's gonna get thicker again, and as it cools slightly, it's gonna make it a little bit easier to navigate. As always, I'm gonna put my knife link in the description below. I'm also gonna put the link to Mama Whitten's kitchen if you'd like to join me live. But another really exciting thing happened this week, and I released my first digital cookbook. And you can get 15 shortcut supper episodes with me, as well as the recipe cards, like a digital cookbook for you to have. And it's my 15 most popular shortcut suppers ever. They've got the most views, the most rave reviews from my actual students, my family. We really have enjoyed doing these, and I'm going to keep them coming, but now you can get the first one in the link below. And I also always like to share with you, in Mama Whitten's kitchen, I not only teach you how to cook by teaching you foundational skills, but I also like to pour into families, into busy mamas, and ensure that you have somebody on your side that's encouraging you in your faith and in motherhood. So if you ever need some of that encouragement, there's a few of those shared on my YouTube channel as well. Those are called Moments in Motherhood. You can go over and watch those. I actually add 3 of those a month in Mama Whitten's kitchen, so those are all living there as well. I hope y'all try this delicious meal, and now that I've talked for just a minute, I think I'm gonna be brave enough to scoop just a little cheat scoop out and give it a taste. I learned a long time ago about this cheat scoop. Sometimes, just sometimes, if you're very patient and you do just the right maneuver, you can get a little bit of this out without anybody being able to tell that you were ever there. There's no way I could eat a whole scoop of this right now, but if I can just get a cheat scoop and show y'all what that looks like, you know what? There it is. There's my crusty cornbread on top. It's gonna take me a few seconds just to cool my cheat scoop down. Oh, but it's so worth it. Think about having this on a busy game day. It's just on the counter, warm and ready for everybody. Really yummy one to take to parties too. Okay, here we go. It's like a hug, y'all. Go try this one. And as always, happy cooking, y'all. See you in the kitchen.